8. Uyuni Train Graveyard. The Train Graveyard is a popular tourist attraction located near the town of Uyuni in southwestern Bolivia. It's also known as the Uyuni Train Cemetery. The site is home to a collection of old rusted locomotives and train cars that have been abandoned and left to decay over time. The train graveyard is a result of Bolivia's once thriving mining industry. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Uyuni served as a hub for transporting minerals, particularly tin, from the surrounding mines. The mines at Uyuni were particularly busy during the World War years, with tin being a desired resource for things such as weapons and various armaments. However, when World War II ended, the mining industry in Bolivia went into decline, and lots of the mines had been completely exhausted of resources. This led to many trains and rail equipment becoming obsolete, leading to their abandonment in the Uyuni area in the salt flats. Today, the train graveyard has become a popular tourist destination due to its unique and eerie atmosphere. Visitors can explore the area, climb on the train cars, and take photographs of the rusted remnants of Bolivia's industrial past. The site's not vanished though, so visitors are still reminded to be careful when they're exploring the location's desolate surroundings, with the vast salt flats of the Salar de Uyuni nearby, add to its distinctive appeal. There's even a hotel nearby that's completely made of salt blocks. 7. A quarry of World War II cars. In an old quarry in France, Belgian photographer and PE teacher Vincent Michel discovered a massive amount of World War II era cars. Inside one of the mined-out shafts of the quarry were rows upon rows of cars parked neatly. The rows of cars stretched for what seemed like an eternity through the tunnel. Unfortunately, the cars weren't salvageable, as they'd been rusting away for so long they were practically locked in place. Though, it did appear as though some of the cars had been salvaged for their parts at one time. But why were all these abandoned cars here in the first place? The answer lies in when they were left. In World War II, France was quickly occupied by German forces, and so many of the people living near to the quarry decided to stash their vehicles away there in order to stop them from being taken and requisitioned by the enemy. There are some more modern cars here though, although by modern we mean early 1960s vehicles. These were left here by the quarry's owner, and the blue paint of a 1960 Opel Capitan is still visible on the vintage car's chassis. Among this treasure trove of automobiles are makers such as Citroëns, Peugeots and Renaults, representing the very best in French automotive manufacturing. Since the discovery, some of the cars were successfully moved to go to auction, but this was only a handful. The vast majority still remain where they were parked over 80 years ago. 6. 1957 Ford Fairlane. In 2005, a couple traveled to visit their daughter, who was living and working on a ranch owned by an elderly gentleman in Colorado. There was a barn on the property that was filled with all kinds of old farming equipment, such as tractors and plows. The man's daughter was excited to show him one of the vehicles. Towards the back of the barn was a car covered with tarp, and immediately he could see from the white paneling that it was a 1950s automobile. After pulling back the tarp, they could see it in its full majesty. A two-tone green 1957 Ford Fairlane. The car was in excellent condition. The Ford was fully intact, including the wheel covers. It had a Thunderbird special engine with a 4-barrel car, dual exhaust, and a 3-speed manual transmission. The interior, adorned with a beautiful two-tone green color, was stunning. There were no rips or tears, and the seats were protected by covers installed by the dealership. Although the trim needed a bit of polishing, it was all present and in great shape. The odometer displayed 43,000 miles, and the car was operational, occasionally being moved around inside the barn. Intrigued as to why such a beauty of a car was left in a barn, they decided to get the full story from the owner. The old man told them that a close friend bought the car brand new while serving in the military and stationed in Florida. The car remained in Florida until the original owner passed away. The late owner's wife then decided that her husband's good friend should inherit the car. It's unclear whether the current owner purchased the car from the widow or received it as a gift, but it was relocated to Colorado in the late 80s or early 90s. Since then, it's been stored in the barn. The man let one of his friends, who was a 1950s and 1960s car enthusiast, know about the find and put him in contact with the owner to see if he would sell it. However, negotiations didn't go anywhere as the old man couldn't make up his mind as to whether he wished to sell. To this day, it's likely that the car remains in the barn, unsold and still under the tarp. What would you do if you inherited a car such as this one? Let us know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. 5. The Atlas Hovercraft. In Green Cove Springs, Florida, there's an abandoned husk of a hovercraft. Spanning 125 feet in length, it's not exactly small. Explorers have taken pictures of a large, eerily empty interior, with no signs of furniture or fixing ever having been installed. So, who built it and why is it here? Construction began on the hovercraft in 2005, thanks to a company known as Atlas Hovercraft Inc. The company's aim was to create a fleet of hovercrafts in order to ferry passengers across the St. Johns River and other waterways within the state. The engineer in charge of the $10 million hovercraft project was Kurt Peterson. Kurt claimed to build on the 100 years of innovation of air cushion vehicles, with advanced features that would mitigate some of the drawbacks. Drawbacks such as high noise, low maneuverability, and high operating costs that have plagued other commercial hovercraft projects in the past. The aim of Atlas was to get a port for the hovercrafts up and running in Palatka by the spring of 2007, but this never happened. However, if you asked any of the engineers and government officials who'd been given a first look at the project, they would have likely been able to tell you why. Many of them doubted that anyone working on the project had any engineering knowledge at all, as the hovercraft was being constructed not in a controlled environment, but rather while being left open to the elements. The project then appeared to go quiet, but a social media message from Peterson in April 2008 read, "Hello, I'm still here and as busy as ever." He then went on to let people know what progress had been made on the craft, which went by the project name AH100P, saying that it was in the home stretch and that the exterior was being readied for paint and windows and doors were ready to be installed. This was the last message from Peterson, and in 2011, confirmation from an ex-Atlas employee led to the news that the company was no longer in operation and has in fact closed its doors to employees due to a lack of funds back in May 2008, just 1 month after Peterson's positive message on the project's progress. As a result, the hovercraft was left abandoned where it had been set to be constructed, with only a completed fiberglass hull to show for the company's vision. 4. The helicopter in Aburi Botanical Gardens. In the Aburi Botanical Gardens in Ghana, visitors can see many colorful plants and displays. One in particular stands out. It's a bit stranger than the rest, an abandoned helicopter. If you were thinking that the helicopter crash landed here or was a casualty in a war or conflict, you'd be wrong. Instead, the helicopter is remarkable for a completely different reason. The helicopter was actually one of the very first in Ghana and was gifted to the country by none other than Queen Elizabeth II. The chopper saw active use within the country before being retired when it grew too old to be usable. Instead of scrapping this piece of history, it was placed in the Aburi Botanical Gardens. Tourists and visitors can explore the chassis and take pictures with the craft, with it being a popular place for children to play. 3. The Sham Rockaway. Over the years, people have come up with innovative ways to create RVs and motorhomes to be able to live a life on the open road. But there's one creation that stands out among all the rest, mainly because it was made out of two 1962 Buick wagons. It was built by J. Dennis McGuire. McGuire had carried out a few creative projects before, such as creating a few bespoke RVs out of buses. But his true passion project was the RV that became known as the Sham Rockaway. He started the project after retiring, and it took him until he was 69 to complete it. Many people would question why McGuire would take on such a crazy task, but according to his daughter Colleen, he would always respond with, "Why not?" McGuire had always had a love for Buicks, and this is likely why he chose them as the base of his creation. It drove on the third axle, and thanks to its massive size of 9,910 pounds and its length, the turning circle would have been pretty shocking. We're not sure how fast it would have been able to go either, as it was only propelled by a Dynaflow transmission and 401 cubic inch V8 engine. Despite this, the sham Rockaway took Maguire and his wife away on many adventures across the country, including through Pennsylvania and Arizona, drawing many strange looks wherever they went. However, when Maguire passed away in 1990, the sham Rockaway was put up for sale and then eventually abandoned, but it appears to have recently been bought from a wrecking yard. So, who knows if we'll see it back on the road sometime in the future. 2. Blackpool Tram Graveyard. Near the docks area in Fleetwood Haven near Blackpool in Lancashire, UK, is a treasure trove of abandoned trams. These colourful cars stretch back across many decades, all with colourfully painted exteriors that would have originally delighted tourists heading to the famous seaside resort. Some have monkeys and other animals painted on them in order to advertise the local zoo, while others are in the bright yellow of the metro system. Although the outside of the vehicles is still vibrant despite the encroaching rust, the interiors of the trams are less than pretty, with some urban explorers even describing them as being chaotic. The seats were ripped up, and in some cases taken away from their fixings and just placed in the haphazard piles inside. Some things had even started to go mouldy after not being looked after for years. The trams are situated on private land owned by the Fleetwood Heritage Leisure Trust, which aims to rehome the vehicles. However, many have not moved for decades, and some locals worry that the beloved colourful trams will simply be left to rust away. Despite this, the occasional urban explorer will still go and document the tram cars from time to time, providing a snapshot of the resort's history. Although there are still trams running in Blackpool, which was one of the first places to have an electrified tramway in the world, these days they're a shadow of the joyful chassis of the past. 1. The TSS Duke of Lancaster. The TSS Turbo Steamship Duke of Lancaster is a former passenger ship that was built in 1955 by Harland and Wolff Shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland. It was initially named the Duke of Lancaster, after the title held by Queen Elizabeth II in her capacity as the Duke of Lancaster. The ship was intended for the London, Midland and Scottish Railway Company, LMS, and operated as a passenger and car ferry. The Duke of Lancaster was known for its unique exterior design, featuring a striking red and white paint scheme. It had a capacity to carry both passengers and vehicles on its journeys across the Irish Sea. The ship provided transportation services for over a decade before it was taken out of service in 1978. After being decommissioned, the vessel went through various owners and purposes. Nicknamed the Fun Ship, it operated as a bar and casino for a good number of years, drawing anger from local residents thanks to the rowdy nature on board. The business venture closed in 2004, and the ship was once again abandoned. Over time, the Duke of Lancaster gained a reputation for its unique appearance and became a subject of curiosity and urban exploration. In 2012, the TSS Duke of Lancaster got an unusual facelift. Graffiti artists from all over Europe were invited to come and paint the ship's hull with colourful images and designs, turning it into a massive open-air art gallery. Sadly though, in 2017, the fun was finally over, and the ship was completely painted over in black, a state in which it remains to this day.
7. DUMBs. DUMBs stands for Deep Underground Military Bases. These are secret facilities built by the government or other organizations. Some of them are used for research, development, testing, storage, or defense. Others are rumored to be caught up in more sinister activities, like human trafficking, mind control, alien experiments, or even cannibalism. The existence of DUMBs is not officially confirmed by any group with authority, but there are many sources that claim to have evidence or information about them. Some of these sources are whistleblowers, researchers, conspiracy theorists, or eyewitnesses. They often give maps, coordinates, photos, videos, or documents to support their statements. Some of the most famous DUMBs are said to be found in well-known places like Area 51 in Nevada, Dulce Base in New Mexico, Pine Gap in Australia, Montauk Base in New York, or the infamous Denver International Airport in Colorado. These bases are allegedly all connected by a network of underground tunnels and trains that allow fast and secret transportation. But not everyone believes in DUMBs. Some people think that they're just big hoaxes, myths, or simply disinformation. They argue that there's no solid proof or explanation for their existence. They also point out the difficulties and immense costs of building and maintaining such massive underground structures. It would be nearly impossible to keep construction on that level secret. So what do you think? Are the DUMBs real or not? Do you want to know more about them? If you do, you can always try to find more information. Just be careful not to fall for misinformation. And remember, don't dig too deep. 6. The secret tunnels of the White House. Did you know that the White House has a secret network of tunnels underneath it? These tunnels are not just for hiding from threats or escaping danger. They are also used for transporting both people and goods, connecting to other buildings, and even special events. One of the oldest tunnels is the one that connects the White House to the Treasury Building, right next door. This tunnel was built back in 1941 during World War II to offer a safe route for President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his staff in the case of an emergency. The tunnel is about 761 feet long and has a steel door at each end. It also has a secret entrance on H Street, which looks like a normal sidewalk grate, nothing suspicious. Another tunnel is one that connects the White House to the Capitol, where Congress meets. This tunnel's existence was a rumor for a long time, but it was never confirmed until 2015, when a former Secret Service agent revealed it in a book. The tunnel is used for emergency situations, like evacuating the president or transporting important documents. The tunnel is also equipped with a subway system that can carry passengers at fast speeds. The most famous tunnel is the one that leads to the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, PEOC, a bunker under the east wing of the White House. This tunnel was built during World War II also, and it's designed to be a command center during times of crisis. It has televisions, phones, and communications facilities, as well as a conference room and a small living area. It is where Vice President Dick Cheney and his staff stayed during the 9/11 attacks. It's also where President Trump was taken during protests in 2020. These are just some of the tunnels beneath the White House. There are many more that are still classified. Some say that there are tunnels that connect to the Blair House, Camp David, and even the Pentagon. Who knows what secrets they may hold? Maybe one day we will find out. 5. The Moscow Metro 2. If you're a fan of secret underground tunnels, you'll love the Moscow Metro 2. This is a mysterious metro system that is believed to exist under the streets of Moscow, parallel to the public metro. It was supposedly built by Stalin, who wanted a private and secure way to move around the city. It was also a backup plan in case of a nuclear war. The system was codenamed D6 by the KGB, the Soviet secret police. The Moscow Metro 2 supposedly has 4 lines that are 124 to 656 feet deep. It is said to connect the Kremlin, the seat of power, with other government and military buildings, like the FSB headquarters, the Vnukovo 2 airport, and an underground city at Remenki. It's also said to have bunkers and shelters that could hold up in the event of a nuclear attack. The Moscow Metro 2 is shrouded in mystery. No official confirmation or denial of its existence has been made by Russian authorities. Only a few people claim to have seen or even entered the system, like former KGB agents, urban explorers, and a few journalists. Some evidence of it has been found though, such as maps, documents, and photographs. The Moscow Metro 2 is a fascinating topic for anyone who loves history, conspiracy theories, and urban legends. It is also a potential tourist attraction if it ever becomes open to the public. You can imagine how exciting it would be to ride a secret subway that was once used by Stalin and his comrades. 4. The Kuchi Tunnels. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live underground, to crawl through narrow tunnels, dodge booby traps, and fight for your life? If so, you might want to visit the Kuchi Tunnels, located in Vietnam, where you can experience a piece of history and also have some fun. The Kuchi Tunnels are a network of underground passages that were used by the Viet Cong, a communist group, during the Vietnam War. The tunnels stretched for over 124 miles, from the outskirts of Ho Chi Minh City all the way to the Cambodian border. They served as hiding places, supply routes, hospitals, and living quarters for thousands of fighters and civilians. The tunnels were dug out by hand, using simple tools and baskets to remove the soil. They were often only a meter wide and a meter high, with multiple levels and branches. They also had features like trapdoors, air vents, and water wells. The Viet Cong also set up many booby traps along the tunnels, such as spikes, grenades, and even snake pits. The tunnels were a major challenge for the American and South Vietnamese forces, who tried to get rid of them with bombs, chemicals, and ground attacks. They also trained special soldiers called tunnel rats to enter the tunnels and flush out the enemy. But the Viet Cong were able to resist and survive in the tunnels for years at a time. Today, the Cu Chi tunnels are a popular tourist attraction where you can learn about the history and culture of the Viet Cong and the war. You can also explore some of the tunnels yourself if you are brave. You can see how the people lived underground, how they cooked their food, how they made weapons, and how they fought back. You can even try shooting some of the guns they used at a nearby firing range. The Cu Chi tunnels are a unique and exciting way to experience Vietnam's history. They are not for the faint-hearted or claustrophobic, but they're still definitely worth a visit if you're looking for some fun. Would you explore the tunnels if given the chance? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. 3. FDR's bomb shelter. Imagine you were the President of the United States during World War II. You just learned that Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor and that your country is now involved in the war. You also know that your enemies have powerful bombs that could destroy your city and your home if given the opportunity. Where would you go to stay safe? If you're Franklin D. Roosevelt, you would hide underground. That's right, FDR had a secret bomb shelter built under the White House, where he could hide from enemy attacks while still running the country. But this was not just any bomb shelter, it was a 10-room apartment, complete with a command center, a living room, and a secret tunnel. The Treasury Building, which is close to the White House, has an old vault underneath it where the bomb shelter was built. The vault was converted into a cozy living space with carpet, wall drapes, food, and water supplies. The shelter also had a direct phone line to the Oval Office and a radio transmitter to communicate with military officials. The secret tunnel was created in 1941, shortly after the Pearl Harbor attack. It connected the White House basement to the Treasury moat, which was a dry ditch around the building back then. FDR used the bomb shelter and the tunnel several times during the war, especially when there were air raid warnings or threats of imminent sabotage. He also used them for other reasons, like hosting secret meetings or escaping from unwanted visitors. The shelter and the tunnel were both kept secret from the public and even from some of his staff members. The bomb shelter was only a temporary solution. In 1942, FDR ordered the construction of a more permanent and secure bunker under the east wing of the White House. This bunker was dubbed the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, PEOC, with 7-foot-thick walls to protect against 500-pound bombs. The PEOC was later used by other presidents during crises, like 9/11 and the 2020 protests. FDR's bomb shelter and tunnel are part of the hidden history of the White House. They show how the president adapted to the challenges of his time and prepared for worst-case scenarios. They also show how he still had a sense of humor and adventure, even in times of war. 2. Dulce Base, a conspiracy theory of a secret underground facility. Do you believe in aliens? If you do, you might have already heard of Dulce Base, a rumored underground facility that allegedly houses extraterrestrials and humans. According to some conspiracy theorists, Dulce Base is under Archuleta Mesa on the Colorado-New Mexico border near Dulce, New Mexico. The origin of this conspiracy theory can be traced back to Paul Benowitz, an Albuquerque businessman who claimed to have heard electronic communications from alien spacecraft and installations outside of Albuquerque during the late 1970s. He quickly became convinced that he had discovered a secret underground base near Dulce, inhabited by gray aliens and humans. He reported his findings to the Air Force and other agencies, but was instantly dismissed as delusional and paranoid. But his claims did catch the attention of the UFO community and were spread by various publications. Some of them claimed to have independent confirmations of the base's existence. Some of the supposed features of the Dulce Base include a 7-story compound with levels for different purposes, such as genetic experiments, mind control, human-alien hybrids, and weapon development. A central hub with a nuclear-powered drill, a shuttle system that connects Dulce Base to other underground bases around the country, a security system with cameras, lasers, and biological weapons, a vast network of cages and labs where thousands of humans and animals are experimented on by aliens and rogue government agents, and a resistance movement of human workers who have rebelled against the aliens. There is no hard proof that Dulce Base exists, or that any of these claims are true. Most of the sources are unreliable or fabricated. The official stance of the government and the military is that Dulce Base is a giant hoax. The residents of Dulce Base also deny any knowledge of or involvement in such a facility. Dulce Base is one of the most controversial and intriguing conspiracy theories in the UFO field. It appeals to those who are fascinated by the possibility of alien life and secret government projects. It also challenges those who are skeptical to find alternative explanations for the anomalies surrounding it. It is a story that captivates the imagination and provokes debate. It is also a story that may never be fully solved. 1. The Reverse Underground Railroad. You probably know about the Underground Railroad, the secret network of people who helped enslaved African Americans to freedom in the 19th century. But do you know about the Reverse Underground Railroad? The opposite network of people who kidnapped freed African Americans and sold them back into slavery in the South. The Reverse Underground Railroad happened for about 85 years, from 1780 to 1865, before and during the Civil War. It was a lucrative business for kidnappers who could make up to $15,000 in today's money for every victim. They used deception, violence, and coercion to capture their prey, often targeting children. They transported them across state lines using secret routes and secluded hiding places like caves, tunnels, or boats. They also destroyed or falsified any documents that could prove their victims' free status. The Reverse Underground Railroad was a nightmare for free black communities in the North. They lived in constant fear of being abducted or losing their loved ones. They also faced legal obstacles and racial discrimination when trying to rescue their family members. Some of them formed vigilance committees to fight back against the kidnappers. Others even risked their own lives to infiltrate the slave states and search for their missing relatives. The Reverse Underground Railroad was a horrific crime against humanity that has been largely forgotten. It shows us how slavery was not only a Southern institution, but a national problem that affected millions. It also shows us how brave and resilient the freed individuals were in the face of such injustice and terror. 8. First ever full-size scans. In May 2023, researchers released the first ever full-sized 3D digital scans of the Titanic wreck. Using a pair of remotely operated vehicles, the team captured the wreck and its 3-mile, or 5-kilometer debris field in stunning detail. The images showed not only what's left of the ill-fated ship itself, but the personal belongings of its 2,200 passengers, including watches, champagne bottles, shoes, and other items that are scattered across the ocean floor. After capturing more than 16 terabytes of data, made up of 715,000 images, the researchers spent 7 months piecing the scans together to create larger images encompassing the entire wreck. It's given both experts and enthusiasts the opportunity to see the ship like never before. Even the serial number on the propeller is clearly visible. Researchers hope that the unprecedented images will offer new insight into exactly what happened on the night of the sinking. They've already made several new discoveries, including that one of the ship's lifeboats was never deployed because it got stuck on a piece of metal. But many unanswered questions remain, and until now, experts have mostly speculated about the Titanic's final hours at sea based on witness reports, rather than making evidence-based conclusions. But hopefully that will change soon. 7. Long missing gold necklace. Shortly after the deep-sea mapping company Magellan released the first ever full-size digital scans of the Titanic wreck in 2023, The discovery of a long-missing gold necklace among the wreckage was announced. In the images, experts noticed a gold necklace made from the tooth of a megalodon, a massive extinct shark that made the great white seem small. Current law prohibits visitors from removing anything from the wreck and the surrounding area. But Magellan hopes to somehow reunite the necklace with the surviving family members of its original owner. Staff members are using artificial intelligence to identify living descendants of Titanic passengers as part of an effort to identify who owned the necklace and who it should rightfully go to next. They also plan to examine footage of passengers in hopes of catching a glimpse of someone wearing the necklace, and possibly even identifying the person based on facial recognition technology. 6. Missing tourist submersible. On June 19, 2023, news sources reported that a submersible designed for taking tourists to the Titanic wreck had vanished during an expedition with 5 people on board. The vessel was equipped with an emergency 96-hour supply of oxygen, according to Coast Guard Rear Admiral John Mauger. But the ocean is a big place, and it's difficult to locate something in the dark depths. In an attempt to locate the submersible, a massive air, surface, and underwater Coast Guard search was underway, roughly 900 miles, or 1,448 kilometers, off the coast of Cape Cod. The vessel is owned by OceanGate, a privately owned company that offers tours of the wreck to groups of up to 5 people. And in a statement, OceanGate reassured the public that it was participating in the search and doing everything in its power to locate the missing vehicle. The identities of the people on board were confirmed by news outlets. UAE-based pilot and British billionaire Hamish Harding, the CEO of OceanGate Stockton Rush, French submersible pilot Paul Henry Narjolet, Pakistani businessman Shahzad Dawood, and his son Sulaiman Dawood were all passengers on the deep-sea submersible. But according to the most recent reports, an implosion occurred underwater roughly 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive, killing all 5 people on board. While visiting the Titanic wreck is possible for civilians who can afford the pricey adventure, only 250 people have ever been to the site since its discovery nearly 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers beneath the ocean's surface in 1985. Prices start at $250,000 per person, which explains why it remains a niche category of tourism. But after this last incident, it's unlikely that people will be lining up to make the trip down to the famous ship. 5. The mystery ship that turned away from the sinking Titanic. Many accounts of the Titanic's sinking fail to mention that there was another ship within view of the gargantuan vessel as it slipped beneath the frigid surface on the North Atlantic during the early morning hours of April 14, 1912. At the time, some of the people who hadn't drowned yet were still setting off rockets and flares in hopes that the ship would come and rescue them. And there's no doubt that the crew could see the signals, but instead of sailing toward the wreck, the ship disappeared off into the darkness. Both American and British authorities initially blamed the SS Californian, captained by Stanley Lord, of being the vessel in question that abandoned the Titanic disaster. In fact, an inquiry concluded that the survivors of the Titanic couldn't have seen any other ship, and that it must have been the Californian. But the wreck's discovery in 1985 proved that the Californian was 17 to 20 miles, or 27.4 to 32.2 kilometers away from the Titanic at the time of the sinking. The Californian and Captain Lord were exonerated of any culpability, finally clearing Lord's name long after he'd gone to his grave. Writing for the Washington Post in 1991, journalist Ken Ringle raised the possibility that authorities used the Californian and Lord as a scapegoat during the time when they needed someone to blame for the disaster. Regardless of whether or not this is true, the mistake sent researchers on a mission to once again determine the identity of the ship that sailed away. And to this day, it's one of the many questions surrounding the Titanic's sinking that remain unanswered. In 2023, a team of investigators tackled the mystery on the PBS special Secrets of the Dead, Abandoning the Titanic. During the show, they discussed how log tampering and testimony from 2 particular witnesses suggest that the mystery ship may have been a vessel called the Mount Temple. But this is simply a possibility rather than a hard fact, and the identity of the ship remains unknown, despite the attempts of many to put the mystery to rest. Do you think there's a bigger conspiracy behind the sinking of the Titanic? Why or why not? Let us know down below. And while you're at it, subscribe. 4. Fatal design flaw. To this day, experts are unsure exactly what caused the Titanic to sink. And while it's largely agreed upon that the ship struck an iceberg, the other circumstances that contributed to the disaster remain largely unexplained. Some have argued that the Titanic had a faulty rudder, while others have suggested that Captain Edward Smith chose a faulty course for the ship. But a breakthrough report released in 2023 claims that a simple design flaw might be to blame. Scientists Jennifer Hooper McCarty and Timothy Folk spent 2 decades studying the sinking of the Titanic. In their newly released book, What Really Sank the Titanic, they blame the catastrophe on poorly designed rivets that were holding the ship together. In their analysis of 48 of the ship's rivets, the pair found evidence that the shipbuilder, Harland and Wolff of Belfast, used cheaper iron than they originally planned on. During an appearance on The Early Show, McCarty explained how she began studying the Titanic's rivets in 1999 while working on her PhD at Johns Hopkins University. She said that the rivets were especially important because they held the ship together. Using cheaper iron may have made them more prone to popping open under pressure when they otherwise may not have. In other words, when the Titanic struck an iceberg, the weakness of the rivets may have been a key reason why the collision tore a devastating hole in the side of the ship. It's not a particularly exciting explanation, but it's certainly a dismal one. In fact, the idea of the Titanic sinking because of a cost-cutting measure only makes the disaster seem even more preventable than we already know it was. But it wasn't necessarily a reckless decision, according to McCarty. In defense of the engineers who chose to use the lower-cost iron, she said that they would have taken multiple safety factors into consideration, and they truly believed the ship still would have been seaworthy. She further mentioned how the combination of events that led to the Titanic sinking had a 1 in a million chance of leading to such a tragic ending. The builders were also under pressure to get the ship built fast and cheaply, according to co-author Timothy Folk, who works as a metallurgist for the U.S. government's National Institute of Standards and Technology. He's also spent over a decade studying the Titanic, and to add to the pressure, there were 2 other ships being built at the same shipyard, and the demand for rivets was in the millions. This may have led to decisions that compromised the quality of the ship's materials. In conclusion, McCarty and Folk believe that the decision to use cheaper iron for the ship's rivets was made knowingly, but not with any idea that the parts were so cheap they might cause the ship to sink when it hit an iceberg. Harland and Wolff have denied the author's claims, and this is just one of numerous proposals that have been put forth in recent years to explain the Titanic's sinking. And while it's possible that McCarty and Folk are onto something, it hasn't been proven. 3. The ship that tried to warn the Titanic. On the evening of April 14, 1912, the British merchant steamship SS Mesaba sent the Titanic a warning about the iceberg that it ended up hitting later that night. The Titanic received the message, but it didn't reach the ship's main control center and therefore went unnoticed. It's hard to say whether the crew would have avoided the disaster if they knew about the iceberg, since they were supremely confident that the Titanic was unsinkable, and it was important to prove that the vessel was also fast, which is why it was chugging along at full speed that night. But it's hard not to wonder if 1,500 lives would have been spared had the message gotten through. The Mesaba continued operating for another 6 years, until it was torpedoed by a German World War I U-boat in 1918. 20 people died as a result, including the captain. For more than a century, its exact location remained a mystery. But finally, in late 2022, scientists at the University of Wales announced that they'd located the Mesaba in the Irish Sea using multi-beam sonar. The discovery was made as part of a larger effort to study the effect of the ocean on energy-generating infrastructure. Shipwrecks provide valuable information to this end, and the Mesaba was one of the 273 that were found in the Irish Sea during the project. 2. A vanishing wreck. According to experts, what's left on the Titanic could, and probably will, disappear in the somewhat near future. For over 110 years, the darkness and cold temperatures of the North Atlantic have kept the wreck relatively well preserved. But other factors are taking a toll on its condition, and the Titanic has visibly deteriorated since its discovery in 1985. In 2010, scientists discovered a new type of protobacteria on rusticles recovered from the wreckage. Dubbed Halomonas titanicae, It may be largely responsible for the Titanic's rapid decay. The metal-eating bacteria survive with remarkable ease at the shipwreck's depth and are eagerly consuming hundreds of pounds of the ship every single day. Deep-sea currents and salt erosion are also destroying the sunken vessel. Parts of the wreck have disappeared completely, including its 100-foot, or 30.5 meters, forward mast and the crow's nest. The poop deck, where panicked passengers clamored as the ship went down, has folded in, and the gymnasium near the grand staircase has completely collapsed. In 2016, experts estimated that the wreck will be gone by 2030. They knew that the Titanic would eventually vanish, but they didn't think, until recently, that it would happen so soon. Divers visited the wreck in 2019 for the first time in 14 years and confirmed that the wreck is in an advanced and ever-worsening state of deterioration. Last year, exploration company OceanGate Expeditions announced that a team was traveling to the site to document what's left of the Titanic before it disintegrates completely. Since then, the explorations have continued, but the future of the wreck remains unclear. 1. Mystery victim identified. On April 21, 1912, 7 days after the Titanic sank, a rescue crew pulled the body of a light-featured toddler from the water. The little boy was buried with several other victims at a cemetery in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and his grave was marked with a stone that simply read, "Unknown Child." A century later, in 2012, researchers announced that they believed they'd finally identified the child as 19-month-old Sydney Leslie Goodwin from England. But the findings were initially met with caution, since the toddler had been incorrectly identified twice before. The results, however, were more reliable this time around. In 2001, Ontario-based ancient DNA expert Ryan Parr began to wonder if there was still any interest in identifying nameless Titanic victims. At the time, it was still believed that the child was likely a Swedish boy named Gösta Leonard Palsson. His remains were exhumed with permission from the child's surviving relatives, and it was soon found that his mitochondrial DNA didn't match that of his family members. Those working on the project tracked down living relatives of 5 other missing boys who were under the age of 3 when the Titanic sank. Using mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from mothers to their offspring, the team eliminated all but 2 of the boys. They then examined the toddler's teeth and ruled out the older one of the remaining 2 possibilities, concluding that the child was Sydney Leslie Goodwin. The findings were challenged by some, who believed that a pair of the boy's shoes that had ended up at a museum were far too big for a child of Goodwin's age. But DNA once again proved that the team had correctly identified him. Goodwin's remains were relocated to Wisconsin, where his surviving relatives reburied him and held a memorial ceremony. Do you think anything will be done to stop or slow down the deterioration of the Titanic wreck? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.